May 1940. An oak-paneled office in Vienna, not Berlin. Sunlight spills across polished marble floors inside the Central Aviation Directorate of the Reich. At the center of the room stands Field Marshal Otto Reinhardt, head of German air production. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His smile does the damage. An aide hands him a translated intelligence brief. Reinhardt skims it once, then lets it fall onto the desk like a discarded flyer. 50,000 aircraft per year, he scoffs. A quiet laugh ripples through the room. According to the report, the President of the United States has just asked his legislature to authorize an aircraft production goal so large it borders on fantasy. Reinhardt shakes his head. They think factories are magic, he says. They confuse ambition with ability. To him, America is a nation of comfort. Cars, refrigerators, weekend pleasures. Not war, not sacrifice, not discipline. Let them try, Reinhardt adds coldly. Airplanes are not automobiles. What he does not know, what no one in that room knows, is that 900 miles west, in a smoke-filled office above a rail yard in Cleveland, Ohio, a quiet man is already dismantling the old rules of industry. His name is Andrew Keller. Keller was born poor in Northern Europe, learned machinery the hard way, and rose to lead one of America's largest manufacturing firms. Now, he works for the government for $1 a year. No speeches, no uniforms, no ideology. Just numbers, blueprints, and an unshakable belief that scale wins wars. While Reinhardt laughs, Keller is doing something revolutionary. He is turning civilian abundance into military force. In May 1940, the United States produces fewer than 4,000 military aircraft per year. Its air force is small, underfunded, and scattered. Many planes are obsolete. Even allies doubt the promise. Yet the American president stands before lawmakers and declares, "We must build faster than fear, faster than history, and faster than our enemies believe possible." The room in Vienna never hears that line. They hear only the number and dismiss it. Inside Germany, ideology fills the gaps where analysis should be. Intelligence officers who warn that America's factories are awakening are labeled pessimists. Reports describing round-the-clock shifts are ignored. Women entering factories are mocked as desperation. Reinhardt believes discipline beats freedom, command beats cooperation, control beats creativity. He is wrong, because America does not prepare for war the way empires do. It improvises, scales, and overwhelms. By the end of this year, assembly lines will move faster than military doctrine. By the next, concrete will rise where corn once grew. And soon, the same nation mocked as soft will begin producing aircraft at a rate the world has never witnessed. But for now, in that quiet Viennese office, the enemy laughs. And that laughter, dismissive, confident, blind, will echo all the way to defeat. Part 2 will reveal how chaos, failure, and near collapse nearly destroyed the American production dream before it truly began. The dream nearly collapsed. By early 1943, the great factory rising from farmland outside Dayton, Ohio, the one journalists had once called the future of war, had become a national embarrassment. Defect rates hovered near 50%. Aircraft rolled off the line only to be rolled straight back for repairs. Promises of hundreds of bombers per month dissolved into reality. 56. Workers joked bitterly, calling the plant, "Will it fly?" Newspapers sharpened their knives. Politicians demanded explanations. Rivals whispered that mass production had no place in aviation, that precision could not be rushed, that Keller's vision was fantasy. Inside the plant, however, Andrew Keller did not retreat. He did what he had always done. He broke the impossible into pieces. The bomber, an engineering monster of nearly 500,000 parts, was dismantled on paper and reborn as a system. Wings became independent worlds. Fuselages were divided into sections that could be built, tested, and perfected before ever meeting each other. New tools followed new thinking. Hydraulic riveters replaced brute force. Wiring arrived pre-assembled. no longer tangled improvisations. The aircraft stopped standing still. The airplane moved, not the worker. And while critics claimed instability, engineers quietly absorbed hundreds of design changes, strengthening armor, improving range, adjusting bomb racks, without stopping the line. By late summer 1943, the factory was no longer failing. It was accelerating. 100 aircraft a month, then 150, then 300. And in April 1944, the line crossed a threshold history had never seen. A bomber left the factory every 63 minutes. Day, night, rain, snow. One factory was now producing more heavy bombers than entire enemy nations. The enemy noticed first in the air, not on paper. Over North Africa, German fighter units began encountering something unsettling. American pilots were no longer cautious beginners. They flew in disciplined formations, replaced quickly when lost, and, most alarming of all, they kept coming. One veteran German squadron commander wrote in his diary, "We shoot them down, and tomorrow there are more." By January 1943, American bombers crossed into German airspace for the first time. The raids were costly. Crews died. Aircraft burned. But something had changed. Losses that once would have crippled an air force were now absorbed. By autumn, entire bomber groups could be destroyed and replaced within weeks. The war had become arithmetic, and Germany was losing the equation. In February 1944, the skies over Central Europe filled with aircraft beyond counting. During 1 week alone, Allied bombers struck aircraft plants, engine works, and assembly halls without pause. German fighters rose to meet them and did not return, not because of cowardice, because of exhaustion. Germany was losing more fighters than it could build. Worse, it was losing pilots it could never replace. One ace, credited with over 200 victories, later recalled, "The sky was full, from horizon to horizon. We were 8. They were hundreds. It was not combat, it was drowning." By 1944, the scale was staggering. In a single year, American factories produced nearly 100,000 aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, more than Germany would build during the entire war. And the machines themselves told a deeper story. American bombers bristled with powered turrets, advanced sights, and radios that actually worked. Fighters arrived fully armed, fully fueled, fully trained. German pilots increasingly took off with partial ammunition, faulty communications, and aircraft rushed from scattered underground sites. The Reich responded not with innovation, but with desperation. Production was driven underground, into tunnels carved by prisoners who starved, froze, and sabotaged what they were forced to build. Quality collapsed. Transport failed. Fear replaced coordination. By the final year of the war, the contest was no longer between pilots or generals. It was between systems. High above the Pacific, a new American aircraft flew that seemed to belong to another era entirely. Pressurized, long range, bristling with remote-controlled guns and guided by computing machines rather than instinct. Each one cost more than $500,000, an unthinkable sum for any nation fighting for survival. The Germans never built anything comparable beyond sketches and fragile prototypes. By early 1945, American factories were delivering 100 of these bombers every month, without slowing fighter production, without sacrificing transports, without exhausting manpower. This was not superiority. This was overmatch. The truth had already revealed itself months earlier, June 6, 1944. As dawn broke over the English Channel, the sky filled with aircraft until the horizon disappeared. Fighters, bombers, transports, layer upon layer, moving with mechanical inevitability. On that day alone, the Allies launched over 11,000 aircraft. The German response amounted to a few hundred sorties, not because of hesitation, not because of fear, because there was nothing left. This was not a battle plan. It was an industrial verdict. In the months leading up to the invasion, Allied aircraft dropped more explosives on German infrastructure than Germany had dropped on Britain during the entire war. Railways vanished, fuel depots burned, factories shattered faster than they could be repaired. When airborne divisions descended behind enemy lines, they arrived using more transport aircraft in a single day than Germany had ever owned in total. And still, the machines kept coming. By late 1944, individual American air raids involved thousands of aircraft, bombers escorted by waves of fighters that seemed to appear everywhere at once. German pilots gave them a nickname drawn from colonial wars, Indians. They struck without pause. From every direction, in numbers too large to count. The American long-range fighter could reach deep into Eastern Europe, fight anything it met, and return home. Losses were calculated, accepted, and replaced. For Germany, every loss was final. Even the Reich's leaders could no longer pretend. One senior propagandist wrote privately that promises of air superiority had crossed from optimism into criminal fantasy. A field marshal warned before the invasion that the enemy could afford to lose 10 machines for everyone destroyed, and still advance without slowing. And in the final winter, the Führer himself conceded what ideology had long denied. That intelligence reports dismissed years earlier had been correct. Germany had faced capacity, not just enemies. The bombers did more than destroy cities. They destroyed balance. Post-war testimony would confirm that American air attacks reduced German armaments output across the board. Tanks, aircraft, trucks. By margins no emergency program could overcome. Factories dispersed underground produced chaos instead of resilience. Slave labor sabotaged what it was forced to assemble. Transportation delays crippled coordination. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, production lines absorbed change instead of collapsing under it. Germany did attempt one final gamble. A jet fighter, fast beyond anything the Allies could field in combat, entered service in small numbers. Its speed was real, its promise intoxicating. But promises require fuel, engines, trained pilots, and time. Germany had none left. Only a fraction of the jets ever flew. Fewer still flew regularly. Engines burned out after hours. Materials were substituted. Logistics failed. America, by contrast, developed its own jets without abandoning mass production, building thousands of conventional fighters while preparing the next generation. Long after the shooting stopped, the numbers remained. They followed him into captivity, into interrogation rooms, into the courtroom. One former Reich leader, once confident, theatrical, dismissive, became fixated on a single idea: scale. He spoke of one American bomber plant in the Midwest with a mixture of disbelief and resentment. That single installation, he admitted, produced more aircraft than our entire heavy bomber arm at its height. What unsettled him most was not the machines, but the movement. "You supplied armies across 2 oceans," he said quietly. "We could barely sustain forces a few hundred miles from our borders." Germany had fought for rail junctions. America had mastered distance itself. At the post-war trials, prosecutors did not rely on rhetoric. They used graphs. Charts filled the courtroom walls, showing production curves climbing like cliffs, month by month, factory by factory. One line, American output, rose almost vertically. The other flattened, then fell. Film footage played. Assembly lines longer than airfields, aircraft rolling forward without pause, workers stepping aside as completed bombers moved past them like freight trains. The prosecutor read aloud the names of German cities struck by aircraft built in one single American plant. The accused stared at the screen. There was nothing to argue. In sworn testimony, he tried to explain his disbelief. "I knew the United States possessed enormous economic strength," he said, "especially in aviation." Then he paused. "But a 100-fold increase in 4 years? That violated every assumption we had about reality." A prison psychologist later recorded how often he returned to production statistics, recalculating them compulsively, as if different arithmetic might soften the truth. He compared individual American factories to entire German sectors. One name surfaced repeatedly. "That cursed factory," he called it, "the one that broke our backs." When shown engine production totals, America producing more than 3 times as many aircraft engines as Germany, he said nothing at all. For the first time, ideology had no words. The scale still astonishes modern economists. In 1940, America produced only a few thousand military aircraft. 5 years later, it had produced nearly 300,000 bombers, fighters, transports, machines more complex, better equipped, and easier to maintain than their predecessors. But the deeper story was not metal. It was people. At peak, over 2 million Americans worked in aviation, many of them never before employed in industry. Women, minorities, teenagers, elderly workers, the disabled. People totalitarian systems dismissed as expendable or unusable. They were trained, trusted, integrated. By 1945, a workforce that began with no aviation knowledge had become the most skilled aircraft labor force on Earth. And they did not merely build planes. They reinvented how things were built. Techniques developed to keep bombers reliable, statistical quality control, modular assembly, process automation, spread outward after the war. Factories worldwide adopted methods born on those wartime lines. Engineers who optimized bomber production would later design rockets capable of reaching the moon. Workers who once drove rivets into aluminum skins would raise a generation that never doubted technological ambition. The war ended. The transformation did not. Even the economics defied expectation. The aviation program consumed sums that seemed ruinous. Tens of billions in wartime dollars. One bomber program alone exceeded the cost of the atomic bomb. Yet instead of collapse, the economy exploded into growth. Unemployment vanished, income surged, entire regions transformed, workers financed the war themselves, buying bonds with paychecks earned on the very lines those bonds supported. By the final years of the conflict, Germany faced a paradox it could not escape. It worked harder and produced less. After 1943, output per German industrial worker declined, even as hours lengthened and coercion intensified. Shortages multiplied, defects spread, repairs consumed more time than production. Across the Atlantic, the opposite occurred. American productivity did not merely rise, it exploded, increasing by roughly 300% before the war ended. Not through punishment, not through fear, through systems that learned. The infrastructure built for destruction became the scaffolding of peace. Smelters erected to feed bomber production later poured aluminum for homes, appliances, and automobiles. Chemical plants designed for high-octane aviation fuel pivoted to plastics, fertilizers, and consumer materials. Factories that once cut machine tools for aircraft plants retooled the entire American economy. The war did not exhaust industry. It trained it. Behind the visible output lay an invisible triumph. Organization. A single coordinating authority synchronized nearly 200,000 companies, ensuring materials flowed where needed without collapse. Early data processing machines tracked millions of components across continents, preventing bottlenecks before they formed. Information became a weapon. Universities and laboratories fed innovation directly into production. Thousands of scientists worked not in isolation, but in constant contact with factories and frontline units. When pilots reported weaknesses, engineers responded in weeks, not years. When a bomber proved vulnerable, new defenses appeared on the line before the enemy could fully exploit the flaw. When operations demanded greater range, modifications were absorbed without halting output. Adaptation became routine. The contrast could not have been sharper. German aircraft, built in fragmented underground sites under terror and secrecy, evolved slowly, if at all. Changes required approval chains that strangled speed. Feedback from pilots died in bureaucracy. American aircraft, by contrast, never stopped changing. Combat reports from the Pacific influenced assembly lines in the Midwest within days. Solutions devised for Europe appeared on aircraft headed to Asia weeks later. Even factory workers participated. Suggestions from the line reached designers directly. Small improvements accumulated into decisive advantage. Hierarchy gave way to circulation, and circulation beat command. In the final hours of his life, one of the architects of Germany's defeat finally understood this truth. In his last written statement, he did not speak of generals or strategy. He spoke of factories. He admitted that the war had not been lost to superior soldiers, but to a system capable of converting ideas into material faster than any enemy could destroy them. The nation once dismissed as frivolous had buried an empire under steel, aluminum, and organization. His final words to his captor captured the essence of the catastrophe. They had declared war on a giant that had not yet awakened. When it did, resistance became mathematics. History has rendered its judgment. Without overwhelming material superiority, no invasion could have crossed the channel. No bombing campaign could have endured. No island-hopping advance could have spanned the Pacific. Courage mattered, skill mattered, sacrifice mattered, but none of it functioned without supply. The Second World War was decided not only on beaches or in the sky, but on assembly lines stretching for miles, operated by people who believed improvement was always possible. The Allies did not simply win battles, they redefined production. And once that system came into motion, the outcome was inevitable. Because in the modern age, wars are not won by who fights hardest, but by who can build, adapt, and deliver faster than destruction itself. By 1944, the figures left no room for interpretation. One nation, alone, was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined. Allies, enemies, neutral states, all together. This was not superiority measured in margins. It was dominance measured in orders of magnitude. What Germany faced was no longer the prospect of defeat. It faced industrial extinction. And yet, the meaning of this transformation extended far beyond victory on the battlefield. It exposed a deeper truth, one that dictatorships had always denied. The production miracle did not arise from fear. It arose from choice. The workers who built this arsenal were not coerced, chained, or starved into obedience. They were volunteers, citizens who chose to redirect their lives toward a common purpose. Farmers became machinists, clerks became inspectors, students became engineers. They were united not by ideology, but by conviction. And that difference proved decisive. The greatest error committed by the Nazi leadership was not strategic, it was philosophical. They believed that a society devoted to comfort could not endure sacrifice. That diversity weakened cohesion. That freedom diluted discipline. They were wrong on every count. The very traits they dismissed, openness, decentralization, debate, adaptability, became the engines of unstoppable output. When faced with existential threat, a free society did not fracture. It synchronized. The journey from a few thousand aircraft per year to nearly 100,000 annually was not simply an industrial achievement. It was a demonstration of what happens when creativity is unleashed rather than commanded. The goal once mocked as absurd was not merely reached. It was obliterated. Production did not just surpass the enemy. It surpassed imagination itself, while simultaneously sustaining a global war across 2 oceans. History is unkind to arrogance. The man who dismissed American production capacity in 1940 spent the final months of his life confronting numbers he could neither refute nor escape. His personal trajectory mirrored that of the regime he served. Confidence without comprehension, ideology without calculation, contempt without curiosity. From mockery to capture, from denial to admission, his story traced the arc of collapse. The war was lost long before the last bomb fell, lost the moment industrial reality was underestimated. In the end, the reckoning was simple. One system relied on fear, secrecy, and coercion. The other relied on participation, transparency, and speed. One system demanded obedience, the other invited contribution. And when the accounting was complete, no mythology could survive the arithmetic. The aircraft rolling off American assembly lines were more than machines. They were proofs. Proof that free workers could outperform slaves, that cooperation could outperform terror, that diversity could outperform dogma. Every rivet driven, every engine assembled, every wing fitted into place testified to a larger truth, that democracy, when mobilized, is not slow. It is unstoppable. Hermann Göring laughed at the notion of America producing 50,000 aircraft a year. History answered with nearly 300,000. His laughter did not fade quietly. It became an echo, the sound of a regime mistaking belief for capability and discovering too late that ideology cannot outbuild reality. The Third Reich was not defeated only by armies. It was buried beneath an avalanche of production, built by free people in open factories who proved that in the modern world, assembly lines can decide empires.